Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another Wildwoods Beekeeping Podcast. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight on a very nice evening today. And tonight we are joined by Ian Steppler. So I appreciate you joining us tonight, Ian. We had you on about 2 years ago here soon. We got you on early December. So I appreciate you joining us again tonight. And I appreciate everybody joining us tonight as well who's in the chat. And we'll have a good chat tonight. So first, as we always start our live streams, I just wanted to kind of start us up. And I just wanted to ask you, Ian, a little bit, and I just wanted you to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of a brief story on how you kind of got started into beekeeping for some people who may not know who you are, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Grayson. I wandered down from the house to the honey house. I'm in the honey house right now on my computer. I was going to go on my cell phone, but the damn battery doesn't keep charge, so I figured, I'll battle the cold to get down here to make sure I don't cut off on you halfway through the live stream. So it's about 15 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure what that is Fahrenheit. That's cold and windy. It's a very windy day today. So we have definitely hit winter. The bees are all tucked away. I have them in my shed. Actually, I just went into the shed before I hopped on with you here. Notice my fans are going off idle. I like to keep a low airflow through the shed, but the fans are ramped up a little bit, so I want to see what the temperature is in the shed, and it's holding around that 4 degrees. And you just wanted me to talk about so I'm from a family farm here in Miami, Manitoba. We raise livestock, we farm crops, and we look after honeybees. I'm the beekeeper of the family. We have about 4,000 acres of grain land, and my brother manages 650 purebred Charlie stock. So we're quite busy throughout the entire year with that. Right now, things are kind of shifted off harvest. Honey harvest is well far and done. Grain harvest is done, and the line work's all finished up. We're doing some work with the high-oat in the fields. It's doing some tidy up work, hauling our November wheat contracts out today, maybe all the way to the end of the week. Book work behind the desk. So this is a very familiar spot for me right now.
Yeah, I know it must be pretty cold up there, 15 degrees Celsius. We mentioned earlier, up here it's really, really warm. And
minus 15. Yeah,
it's
quite cold. We've had pretty long and open fall so far. It's been actually very nice to get work done on the farm. So we just fell into winter about a week ago or so. A little bit of snow and cold, and then more snow and more cold. So I think we're stuck in winter now.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I do want to tell everybody who's watching the chat that we will answer questions, so please do feel free to put questions in for Ian, and we'll save them, and we're going to try to answer them a little later after we talk about some topics that I do have lined up. I got a couple of them, and the first one I just kind of want to start off on a basic one. I just kind of want to ask you, what is right now your winter strategy? What are you doing now? Some basic things that you're doing to keep your bees, alive down up there, because I know it's much different than down here.
Well, just like I said, I checked the bees in my winter shed before I come on the live here with you. And my strategy, oddly enough, is to keep them cool in the shed. So I'm continuously trying to cool them down. I have them within the shed setting. Actually, those are my colonies in the background there. That's an older picture. But I bring all the colonies into the shed, stack them in rows. I have 1,800 colonies in the shed right now, and turn off the lights, close the doors, and what I try to do is maintain a steady temperature within the shed. That temperature is 4 degrees Celsius. I think that's about 42 Fahrenheit, around that. And that seems to be a very efficient temperature to keep bees nice and calm, so they're not running around overly active, but not too cold where they're burning excess stores that they really don't need to be. So that magic number seems to be around that 42 degrees Fahrenheit. The way I can keep them in their boxes inside is with the lights, turn them off, but I also have to keep them cool. And if you can keep them cool, you can keep them in the boxes. So, but to do that, I have to pump cool air through the shed to remove all the heat that they give off. So right now, my calculated amount of heat being generated off those colonies is between 80 to 100,000 BTUs. So I remove that heat out of the building with cold air and keep them nice and chill inside. I just recently invested into a refrigeration unit. Actually, like I mentioned, we had a very long and mild fall, and I've been thinking about this for quite a while. I finally did pull the trigger at the end of October, and had a local HVAC guy come in and install some refrigeration. So it allowed me to get the colonies into the shed in better time in a warmer situation. I was able to bring them in, turn on that dial, and cool them down with refrigeration. So it worked very well. Yeah, so that's basically my strategy to prepare them for the shed. I have to feed them right up. As you can see, they're singles. So that's a box of bees. And to get that box of bees through winter, I need a box of honey. I could manage them in doubles, but I find managing in singles is much more efficient, especially wintering indoors. So when it comes September, I start feeding them pretty heavy. And as that queen slows down and starts giving up that space within the nest, I chase her with syrup. And my objective is to get about 90 to 100 pounds per colony total weight as we move them into the shed. And that typically gets them through winter. Like we put them in end of October, November, and that should get them into spring, hopefully beginning of April.
Yeah. Lee says that negative 15 would be 5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. Yeah.
And 4 degrees Celsius would be about 40.
32 or 39. Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's see. I do got another topic. I keep my topics in my phone sometimes, so I got to go back and look and see. The next topic I do want to discuss about is feeding, and I do know you mentioned a little about feeding earlier before getting into your shed. So what do you feed with, and kind of tell us a little bit about how you do it.
Primarily, I feed sucrose, and I don't cut it. I feed heavy sugar all the time. I just find it's much simpler. It doesn't spoil. Just that's what I do. So in the fall, well, actually, it starts after the honey flow. Typically, let's say middle of August. That's when my honey flow runs out. Last boxes are off, and then I chase the workload with syrup tanker just to keep them going. So what I try to do at that time is right hot off the honey flow. I try to, and we're starting, we're getting later in the fall. We don't have the full pull and flows like maybe you guys do down there. We kind of run right out. So right at the end of the honey flow, after all the crops are off, boxes are off, we start flashing syrup at them just to keep them going. And then we feed protein patties. And hopefully there's a little bit of like drags of pollen coming in to be able to keep that stimulative effect. And with that little bit of pollen coming in and all the supplement I'm giving them, I can, keep that brood nest and just kind of push it out into September. My objective is to try to have some capped brood in those colonies middle of September. And that time, as that queen starts to reduce her nest, like moving into the shed, there's very little brood in these colonies. There might be some brood. I did not check, but I noticed the colonies going in the shed were about 5 to 10 pounds lighter than I'd like them. And I'm wondering if they started a brood ring just with a milder fall like that, and we're having some late volunteer crops, shedding some pollen into the nest. So I'm suspicious whether or not they started brooding or not. I have a buddy that actually dug into his colonies before the cold weather set in, and he was nice little patches of brood. So typically this time of year they're broodless, and as that queen reduces her nest, I try to chase out of surf just to pack them right out.
Yeah, I get you. Let's see. The next topic I do want to talk about. I think the last time we had you on here, you talked a little bit about nuke batteries. I think that's what we talked about, and I just kind of want to ask you. For some people who might not know what that is, I have done that before, and it's really I actually did it this year. I had a case of that. I had to use a nuke battery, and I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what a nuke battery is and kind of why you like to use it.
Sure. I was just looking at my speaking schedule here, and I'm going to Wausau, Wisconsin, at the end of January, and that's going to be one of my presentations as managing a nuke battery. Actually, that reminds me, I have to contact the guys again. But just the whole effort to sustain operations with minimal cost, minimal investment, how just to, propel operations forward year after year after year. So this basic strategy is, as you leave winter, you want the same amount of colonies than going into winter, so you don't fall to attrition. And beekeepers, we're always battling attrition. Like, how do we fight colony loss because of uncertain circumstances? A lot of it's natural, some of it's not. Most of it's tied up in management. So how do you maintain your colony numbers, but at the same time, without opening up that wallet and just doling out the cash, buying in colonies, buying in stock just to maintain numbers? Up here in the north, I guess you'd call this the north where you are. I call you down. I call you a southerner down there. But up here, we have a very small window of opportunity to build bees and to raise queens. Very small and compact. So that limits our ability to make splits with queen cells and get them going for the honey flow and pack everything into a single year. So what I do to manage that and to help me target ideal conditions for building these bees and mating the queens is I turn it into a 2-year bee building strategy. So I will make the splits in the spring, queen cells, get that colony going into summer, and I don't expect to get a honey crop off those bees because we're just a little bit too late in the season and we're pushing to the end of the honey flow. So what I do is then I focus exclusively on just maintaining and developing those little units out and get them through winter, so then I can use them the following year. So that's what I call my nuke battery, is just this huge glut of nukes that I make throughout the summer months to be able to start replacing losses in that fall, and then ultimately replace the losses in the spring if I have any. And if I don't have any losses, then I can sell bees. So I manage them in such a way that if I have the opportunity to collect nectar off them, I have them set up to be able to bring it in. Sometimes we have a late crop, so those nukes are made up late in the spring, so miss that initial main glut of honey coming in. But if we have flowers that just kind of drag on, maybe some reseeding going on, or maybe a late season sunflower crop somewhere, I might be able to tap into some honey on those nukes. And those years that I can, like this previous year, I can make a lot of money off those nukes just by having them ready to go. Because by that time, they're late bloomers, right? By that time, they're built up. They have the bees. They're ready to go. They just need the nectar. They can bring it in, then I can capitalize on that. And if they don't, then I'm just basically focusing on maintaining that nest and putting them through winter. So that's what I call my nuke battery.
Oh, yeah, new batteries, a great thing to be able to utilize, and I know a lot of people go to conference to all these different conferences and be able to listen to and learn from that is really a great thing. The next topic I do want to talk about, and I use it a lot, and that is rocket fuel, aka Apis Biologics. I know you have used it in the past. I'm not really sure if you use it at this moment, but I use it a lot. It works really good because recently, actually not recently, a year or two ago, a buddy of mine sent me something. I really liked it since. So tell us a little bit why you kind of like to use Apis Biologics and kind of how it helps the bees.
Sure. First off, it's not my product. It's a friend of mine that's out on the East Coast. It's so it all started oh quite a long time ago. I may have had a few hundred hives, and I'm sitting in my kitchen, and I just went through a massive summer dearth, and my colonies weren't set up properly for the winter, and I'm like, I got to be able to do something here because I'm in agricultural country. I have lots of landscape of fields. I don't have a lot of that diverse makeup of the landscape. Things are changing. We're farming more of the land. We're draining sloughs. We're taking some of maybe that unproductive pasture lands and we're converting it to farmland. So I'm losing diversity and such, and that just puts a shortage of that natural pollen coming into my colonies. So I started looking to supplementing my colonies of all the nutrients that there may be deficit. And it's a pretty natural train of thought for me, mostly because I'm a cattle farmer. I'm not so much involved with the cattle anymore, but I was at that time. And we're always feeding and we're mixing supplements and we're balancing out the rations to, you know, improve their nutrition and such. So the train of thought was quite natural to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I got to be able to do something to provide that supplement the bees to help them get through dearths for one thing, or just times of stress where they have like later in the fall, there's a lack of pollen on the countryside, and they go into a nutritional stress, a very critical time within the year for a honeybee. They have to be developing out these nests and they need to be well nourished. So I just felt I needed to put effort into providing that nourishment for them. So I'm kind of playing around with this, and then I'm Facebook and I'm on YouTube, and I'm kind of talking about this and mixing these, trying to balancing out the profiles and all that. And this guy reaches out to me from New Brunswick, and he's just super obsessed with this. And he's like, Ian, he's got about 50 hives or so, and he said, this is right up my alley. And this guy, he reads scientific publications as a hobby, as a pastime. Go figure. And he's obsessed with beekeeping. Beekeeping is not his career; it's just his hobby. But he's like, I do this and I do that, and I get some response this way. And I thought, well, this is the guy I want to talk to because I'm trying to formulate these a supplement for my own bees. And at that time, I don't think the industry was as advanced with a palatable feed like we do have now. If you can buy, I used to be buying these patties off the shelf and I'd throw half of them in the bush because the bees wouldn't eat it. It's very frustrating. So we started mixing our own. We're over social media here talking to each other and just kind of playing little experiments here with the supplements and that. Then we get the protein profile all balanced out, and that's not the easy part, but that's the basic part. Those are the essentials that they're looking for. But then we wanted to take it one step further because you can't take a honeybee colony through 2 generations into the third just basically on supplement. There's lacking essential nutrients that they need to be able to utilize to be able to maintain and sustain development over a long period of time. So we got obsessing over this. What is it that's lacking in this supplement diet that we can't recreate? And we need that fresh stuff coming in to make this supplement work. What is that? So then we started dabbling with some of those micronutrients, and then we started dabbling with just the well, I won't go into the complexities of what he is mixed in there. You'll have to talk to him about that because he could talk to you about 3 hours on it. But what is it that the bees need to be able to utilize the nutrients available to them? What is that? Like, what is it off that pollen grain? If you notice your colony is growing, you really don't get a lot of a stimulative effect until you have that fresh pollen coming in. You can have stored pollen with the nest, they'll grow and develop only to the point where the bees, they'll mine their bodies off and they'll use that protein, but they come to a stalling point. And to further that on, they need that fresh pollen coming in. So, what is it about that fresh stuff coming in that allows the bees to utilize whatever missing nutrient that is and take that step forward? And it comes down to, I'll talk in the specifics and the additive that we have in this Apis biologics. I'll talk more, what's the word for it? I'll talk more in general terms. It comes down to basically the way we see it is, how do you get the bees to access more of those nutrients that they're ingesting? Not only how do you get them to access more of those nutrients, how do you get them to create the environment to actually create some of the nutrients they need to be able to fulfill their nourishment? I don't know if that's making any sense. And basically, in the way we're looking at it, is what the bees are, what I think they're doing is, when they're accessing this pollen, they're eating the pollen in their diet, but they're also eating billions of these little microbes on the pollen grains. And the microbes seed the microbiome within the bee's gut. And this whole interaction between the external environment and the living spirit, is like what I call it, coming in. They're digesting it. They're maintaining this microbiome, which then digests those nutrients you're bringing in. And I think it's the act of those microorganisms digesting, secreting, and also as they're dying, the bees are utilizing all those nutrients those microorganisms are using. So when we're putting together our foodstuffs, we're trying to provide them the nutrients, but we're also trying to not a probiotic, but we're focusing on prebiotic and postbiotic, trying to create the environment to grow the microbes that the bees need to be able to utilize the nutrients coming in, to provide the secretions and allow the bees to find those missing links, basically, the way we look at it. And if you think about it, the honeybees, in a lot of ways, you could classify them more so as omnivores, right? As they're eating living things, microbes being those living things, digesting living things, and having those living things interact within their body and everything else around them. So I don't know if that made any sense at all, but that's basically what we were focusing on on the supplement itself, but trying to take that next step using proven scientific literature from all around the world, and just trying to bring it into an applied sense into our feedstuffs and trying to achieve that missing link. And I won't say we're there, but I tell you, I'm building bees. I'm using this product in there. They're consuming the patties. I have boxes of bees in my shed right now. I can put the patty on, and I can take that nest with very little pollen coming in. I still need pollen coming in. I have a very hard time building bees without that natural stuff. But I can, with that little bit of pollen coming in, I can very easily just push that nest out as far as I want to, and then I can stop feeding in the fall. And then I can start them up in the spring just like that, ignite them. And I call it rocket fuel for a reason, because we have the additive in the syrup also, because we're trying to mimic. And this is everything we have in these products is what you would naturally find in pollen or naturally find in nectar. We're trying to recreate those products. We're not bringing in the substance like, I won't talk about other products, but we're not trying to bring foreign products into the feed stuff. We're trying to recreate uh, as close as we can to the natural food stuff. So that syrup, as we're putting the additives in the syrup, recreating that sugar, basic plain old table sugar, and we're trying to make it. Uh, the bees recognize it as nectar coming into the colonies. And I find, you put a little bit of that on the colony in the spring, you want to stimulate just like rocket fuel, right? So that's where it came. I'm not sure if Andrew appreciates me putting a tag on his product like that because I noticed a lot of people are running with that. But it's just my first reaction when I'm, feeding this product is like, well, just give them a little bit of a jolt and get them going with this product. So there you go. There's a long-winded answer to your question why I use that.
No worries. I love listening to things like that, and that's I will say rocket fuel and Apes Biologics. I use it all the time. It really does get those bees going. Right when I used it, I noticed much of a difference because I used to just feed plain sugar syrup, especially in fall and that time of the year. And then whenever I started using rocket fuel, I started to put it in my sugar syrup, especially in fall, which is my favorite time to do it, and early spring, and those bees just get on the roll. I fed it especially this year to some of my nukes that I bought, and I fed that rocket fuel, and it only took about 2 weeks, and those bees 2 to 3 weeks around that time to get those bees in the full 10 frame box, all 10 frames covered with bees, so much brood. Just I think that's one of the big reasons why that happened, and it's really really good result.
We just thought, if anybody's interested in taking their mixed patty to the next level, they just, adding more of those micros and just more products to try to mimic a natural substance. That's just all you have to buy into the philosophy behind it all. Like it's probiotics too. There's probiotic in it, bacteria and such, to try to recreate that living organism, but not so much focused on that, other than the recreation of the pre and the post. Yeah, so it's not when you're feeding bees a supplement. Uh, it's not going to fix sick colonies, right? So we got to make sure that when guys are trying to stimulate and grow their colonies, and there's problems in your nest, like if you have um, mites, bacterial disease, other types of like gut infection stresses, you have to make sure you address those with proper medication to be able to treat that and cure that. And then after you have the healthy bee, then you can start feeding them a product like a supplement, and then it's more dollar for your buck then. So just feeding is feeding. It just what I'm trying to say is you want to also um, feed for a purpose instead of just throwing money into the pot and just have it burn. You want to focus in on spending that money in the most opportune time to be able to get a return on your investment. My time throughout the year is two critical points of time. One's out of spring, right out of the shed. The bees are like that axe drops, and the bees are in a time clock, and they have to switch out that winter nest into spring. And they limited. They're old bees. They got a lot of work to do. They got to hang on as long as they can, so they need all the help they can get. And just during that time, if we had nice weather, it wouldn't matter. We have pollen coming in, it wouldn't matter. But we don't. Sometimes the pollen flows a little bit late, and it's cold, and the bees are out, they're flying, they're started, then they got going, and then you have to keep them going. Because if they stop going, then they'll run out of time, and there'll be this dwindled little colony. So what I like to do in the spring is feed them the supplement. So when they're going, it can stimulate them, get them going, and help them along, bridge them between all the adverse weather. I have a lot of the time actually I'll feed later on in spring too, just to help bridge between pollen flows, and that just helps decrease those valleys, right? Peaks and valleys, just kind of smooth that out. If I have a little bit extra money, I'll throw it in there. If I need a little bit extra growth, I'll do that. But the other critical point of time is in the fall, like I was saying, after honey flow, when I'm lacking pollen out there and they're building this winter nest. And you have to, I got to push that nest out as far as I can so I can get as many of those young bees in that box going into winter as I can. But I also need them well nourished, as those bees are physiology, like their physical nature is different, where they're packed with proteins and their and fats. You think about setting up a winter nest full of honey and wanting some pollen in there, but those bees are the valuable resource also, full of fats and proteins. That's probably some of the most important resources going through a winter is the bees themselves, because they use those, they mine those resources off their bodies to recreate that springtime nest. So you got to get them through winter in the sugar, but you got to provide them with all the nutrition they need so they can get that nourishment into the spring uh, as they build on the anticipation of pollen meeting them out of the shed or out of winter.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's go and get to the next topic real quick, and I wanted to ask. I know, I don't know if you're doing it now, and I know I just kind of wanted to ask is, what are some things you do to treat for mites? Since you mentioned a little bit about, mites, trying to take care of the mites as well whenever you're feeding, because that is really important. I got done feeding not too long ago, and I just kind of want to ask you, kind of what do you feed, and kind of what's your strategy whenever you're going in and trying to get rid of the mites?
Yeah, my mite control strategy. I don't know if I did a very good job of it this year because I seem to be chasing that 8 ball all fall. Um, as a commercial operator, I tend to focus on products that help me with workload. Like bees, I'm working bees, but I'm also working the land. So we have a lot going on here, and everything's happened so damn fast. We have like a lot of honey coming in at the end of the season. I started losing my workers in September. We got to get these colonies set up. We have to go through process. It takes a lot of time to go through our nests. So I basically gravitate towards more the commercial type treatments, which is an apivar strip, um, and that's been working for me for the last little while. It's been hesitating though on its efficacy. So I have been looking for alternatives to replace apivar or to help apivar with its efficacy. Um, and one of the products I leaned on throughout the earlier part of fall was, as I had my apivar strip in there, I also dropped in some Life var, which is a thymol product. And I figure the two products together synergized a little bit and helped me drop my mite load off. I was maybe shaking 5 up to 8, 10% was my highest yards, way too high. We needed like a under 1% mite count in September to be able to even consider wintering our colonies. So I was a little bit concerned, but those two treatments did drop the mites. And then later on in the fall, as the colonies were drifting broodless, we followed up with a couple of rounds of oxalic acid. And as I was monitoring, like I do monitor, I monitor my colonies on a random basis with an alcohol shake. Well, I switched to soap now. So I'm always sampling just to see where I'm at. And then I'm also monitoring, not a lot, but enough sticky boards underneath just to see what's going on with my treatments. So as I was treating with my apivar, I was noticing there wasn't a lot of drop underneath on my monitoring yards, and my shakes were increasing, and I was, the time's running out. So I pulled the pin and I dropped in the Life var, and that within a week, I was monitoring with the stickies underneath, and within a week, I was dropping, every day 100 until it pretty much ran out of mites. So I purged, and I was after that, the next week, 10 days after that treatment, I was taking alcohol washes, and it dropped from that 5 to 8% down to zeros and 0.3s. So I was quite happy with that. So my monitoring is telling me that the mite drops decreased with that combination, and my sticky board told me that I was getting efficacy, and it showed me the duration of that efficacy right through the treatment period. So that allowed me to throttle back, relax a little bit, and then get to later fall with oxalic acid. And I noticed I still had mites at that time, and that's probably because, well, you're not gonna, I wish I could drop in a treatment to get 100% of them, but they're always hiding from that treatment somehow, whether it be in brood or maybe they're just not getting exposed to the treatment properly. So I like to follow up late in the season as I mop up. I, um, you know, I would not use it as my primary treatment that late in the season because if there's too high mite counts, the damage is already done. And by the time you get to that oxalic acid treatment late in the fall and drop them off, you know, they're already infected full of virus and the mites have already drained their life from them. The mites, they suck on the bees themselves, right? They siphon off the fat bodies within those winter bees, and it's that fat and the protein within those winter bees that provides them with that sense of eternal youth in a sense. So when you have mites on those bees draining their life from them, you'll get a cluster that just looks like this. Every time you go in, it's a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. And the end of October into November, guys was, well, my colonies looked awesome in October, and then come November, they look a lot different. Typically, it's because of mites. They've just siphoned the life right out of them. So I only use the oxalic acid late in the season, just to mop up the remaining. And so I treated one time. What was I getting? Like drops of, like I was shaking basically zeros or 0.3s, so hardly registering. And I was showing that in my stickies. I was getting like after my treatment, it was about 25 on my drop or a 15. So then I followed up the second time, then I got much less. I think it was 5 or 6 on my drop there. And that was telling me that I was pretty much snuffing out the last of the mites within my colonies. So that's my treatment regime. What I'm going to do in the spring, that'll be a question I have to figure out this winter. I'm not exactly sure. It's, I don't know. So we're probably going to follow much the same thing, maybe dabble with some formic. I used formic acid last spring, and I learned a lot about the formic product. I don't know if it worked or not, but I learned how to use it so I didn't kill brood or bees or queens. It's very dependent on conditions. So I think if I was able to provide the right conditions, I think I'd have a lot better luck treating with formic. I think I'm also going to be incorporating more oxalic acid vapor in the spring. Maybe right out of the shed's a hard one because we're so busy trying to get around with things just to keep them like emergency feeding and dropping down patties and I guess if we are going to treat with Apivar, that's when we're doing it is right out of the shed. If we're not going to treat with Apivar, maybe I could substitute that workload with oxalic acid vapor and maybe give them 2 or 3 shots of vapor in the spring. I'm also thinking about later on in the spring using a thymol product just to see if I can, because I did notice in my fall treatments, even the colonies we missed with Apivar, I call them holes. Sometimes the crew goes through and they miss hives. So some of the colonies didn't get Apivar, and I was just using those ones just had the Appy Life Bar, and they still notched the mite counts down, maybe from a 5, but only down to a 2.5 or a 3. So, if I can get a reduction of mites within the spring with an Appy Life Bar or some type of thymol treatment, I think I'm going to incorporate that in just to provide another hammer. And I'm also dabbling with, or I haven't dabbled yet, but I'm hoping to start dabbling with oxalic acid extender pads. Maybe put them on middle of spring, leave them on spring to the honey flow, or maybe if we're allowed, put them on at the end of spring and leave them on through summer, and just maybe get more of that summertime mite treatment to help keep those flare-ups down that we can manage as we get out of the honey flow and into more of a period of time where we can focus on mites with other treatment products. That's all I got though for mite treatment. What do you use?
Me, I've really been fond with Apivar. That's the thing that I've used the last two go arounds that I treated. This year, I was changing it up. I used Apigard down here, and it worked pretty good. And next year, I plan to use some Apigard, but I plan to try to get some more Apivar, because Apivar, that is really one of my favorites to treat with. Thymals. One of my favorites that I like to use. Let's see. I think the next, I will say, feel free to ask any questions, folks, in the chat. We will answer them after this last topic that I will discuss. And I just kind of want to ask you, since I know right now is not the time to make any splits, especially where you're at. I don't even down here, but next year, I know you probably try to make splits. I just kind of want to ask you kind of how you have made splits in the past, and kind of how you plan to go forward with them.
A lot of it's dependent on the type of spring we have. If I have a lot of growth and the conditions are favorable, what I'll do is I'll basically promote the growth and allow the bees, from one box build into two, and then manage my bees, manage the splits by just stripping off the top boxes. Generally, we do that and those high growth, high production springs, because the bees are growing so fast. So we have a hard time getting around to get all the work done. So we go through, and it's pretty much just a slash and burn type thing. Just, you give them the space, and then when next time you come around, make sure you have some queen cells ready and just knock the tops off. Years that we struggle a little bit with the weather, we do more frame to frame work. So we'll go down and we'll sort a certain strength, and anything big we'll take, anything small we'll boost, and anything surplus we'll make into nukes. So those years, it takes a little bit more time to get through the nests, because we're going frame by frame. But typically those type of years, we have more time because the colony growth is so slow. And then we have springs that's a bit of combination of both. So you have tremendous growth, but then you also have, some of those smaller colonies. So what we do is we box up the big ones, leave them for later on the spring to deal with, and then we focus on the smaller ones, boost them, skim, boost, queen replace, do what we have to. By the time we're done that through the rounds, those big ones are ready to split, and then we'll go as hard as we can with queen cells. And we'll either just take the top boxes off, chase the queen down to the bottom, take the top box off, or as we, instead of just taking the top box off, sometimes we'll go through and we'll harvest the brood and make up a whole bunch of nukes. So it all depends on what we're looking for in that spring.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we'll go on and answer some questions from folks who asked them. So let's first start out with, let's see here, Keith Spillman, and he asked, Ian, we see you working on and operating the farm equipment. Do your brothers ever help with the bees?
No, I don't expect them to either. Not everybody likes bees. I brought bees into the family farm because it was a source of cash. And it's just kind of that hobby that grew into a sideline that paid my taxes. And before I knew it, I had more bees that I could manage. So and at that time, our family farm transitioned into a corporate structure where my brothers come in, and we all managed our pool of capital together to, just help get an advantage and help progress our farm in an appropriate manner. So I was able then to take my time away from the rest of the farm in a lot of sense of managing, and focus on the bees and expand that to my capability, as my brothers did the same over there. I am a grain farmer at heart, so it can't keep me off that combine. So I'm always, as I get my workload settled here, and I'll hand the crew off to Carrie, and then I'll go in real busy times and they really need help, go help on the grain farm. So when I focus exclusively on the honey farm, that's my responsibility. But when I see a need to go somewhere else because they're needing manpower or just this business is a bitch with the weather and everything. You have to put your efforts where it's needed. So I'll pull myself from the honey farm, put it into the grain farm, or I'm not so much involved with the cattle farm anymore as we're transitioning our company structure. But this time of year typically be over there hauling bales or feeding cattle or something like that. So just making the best use of my time. But it's hard to pull them back. They used to work in the bees, they did, but they're so busy doing their own thing that they're always behind. They never seem to. They always have an excuse. But that's okay because I hire lots of school kids to help me with the workload, and Carrie's around here. She does more work than you would imagine. It probably works the same as two men, um, and we seem to get through the year. So I'm happy like that.
Oh yeah, so let's go on down to the list to Joseph Rosme again joining, and he asked, Ian, do you have to warm the syrup when feeding early spring or late fall?
I typically don't. We feed through pails, and the pails have little screens on them, right? And we uh, tip the pail upside down over the feed hole. So if you use that single box too, right? So the single box, the clusters chilling out here, typically pressed up against my inner foil, and then the little feed hole. And I tip my syrup over top. That feed is available right over that cluster. So it doesn't take a lot for the bees to access that syrup if they need it. So you'll notice I'm out putting pails and it's snowing. And you'll notice I'm going around complaining about the weather in the yard, and I'll tip back pails and looking underneath and seeing the bees going up and feeding. I find they'll go up and feed. If they need the feed, they'll go get it. If they don't need it, they won't break cluster to go get it. So it seems to work pretty well for me. It's easy to feed a large number of colonies in a short amount of time with pails. It also allows me to feed the colonies without disrupting them in the spring. I don't have to crack open the lid for the inner feeder, right? Crack it open, disturb them, fill it up. Everything's done just by taking the cork out, pail up on top. So very non-evasive that way. And I also find it helps. Like I do have some inner feeders, nothing wrong with them. Just I find you better close them up tight in the spring. It would be robbing. That's something to watch. And it also, I think it adds humidity within the cluster. I don't know if it helps them out or not. If they're big enough, it won't matter. But just I've gravitated to the pail for all those other advantages.
Did you? The next question is from Russell Koopman, and he asks, Ian, which is a better nuke, a 5-framer or a 6-framer nuke, and why?
I keep saying I'm going to retire my 5-framers every year, but we always run out of equipment, so keep stocking the 5s. And the 5s are really good. They mate well, and they just seems to be this spitfire little size that the bees thrive. And I can put two of them together, boxes up on top. They share the space, make me this big honey crop. But come fall, and they're making that winter nest, I would say my 6-framers outperform them going into winter because they have that one more frame of feed or one more frame of brood. It's just that one more frame seems to make a lot of difference there. So if I had some more money in my back pocket, I would take those 5s, sell them, and buy a bunch of 6s.
Yeah. There's Brad from that Bee Man.
Brad's the one that makes you'll notice. I can't see my picture if they're interlocking or not, but I'm kind of modified my style of equipment to be more user friendly. And Brad's come up with this neat little design that helped me with interlocking the lids to the cleats without the disadvantage of tippiness to the pallet because I only run 2-hive pallet, not a 4-way. So he's been keeping busy in his workshop building me equipment, and it's been nice because I've been able to refresh all this old rotten equipment as time goes on.
Yeah. The next question is from Tillman Honey Company, and they ask, how many hives do you think a one-man operation can effectively manage?
Big difference between pollination colonies and honey production colonies. Big difference between operations that maybe do a bit of both. Um, a big difference between outfits that can access labor and outfits that can't. Um, it's a big difference in how much facility you're capable of, not just like how much resource do you have as a individual to build a tap capital. If you can get yourself set up and you have the equipment and the trucks and like the building facility itself, you can handle a lot more than if you're struggling. You don't have a truck. All these things you need to operate a business. But let's pretend you did. Let's pretend you had capital disposal, and let's pretend that you're able to tap into, let's say, school kids in the area, or if you're keen enough to bring in offshore labor to be able to satisfy the workload at hand, sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
They typically, I would say, I'm late. Yeah, everybody's a little bit different. I know some guys that will hire a man per 100 colonies. But then I also know another outfit will hire a man for every 50 colonies. Then I also know a guy that will hire a man for every 2,000 colonies. So that is a very subjective question. Right now, I'm 1,800 colonies. I have Carrie as my full-time beekeeper manager, and I bring in 5 or 6 school kids to help with the main glut of honey flow. I'm pretty well set up with a 60 frame extractor and a facility that works here. I'd say I'm maxed out. 1,500 is probably where I should be, but yeah, lots of factors involved in answering that question.
Yeah. The next question is from Galloway Lights, and he asked, "What's your temperature and humidity goal for the inside of the bees this year?"
Yeah, so inside my wintering shed, that's a topic of debate, and it's basically I find talking to beekeeper to beekeeper is a little bit different, but it seems like a consensus on temperature is around that. Science shows the bees are most efficient at 4 degrees Celsius, so that's the temperature I try to target. And also, I mean, if you brought the temperature down to freezing or below freezing, I think you'd have condensation issues and such. I always found anyway. So I like to have it a little bit warmer in that regards. Some guys like to have the shed a bit warmer than that. They maybe go up to 8 degrees. Maybe they want more activity, or maybe the bees to expand the cluster a little bit more to access more stores. I'm not really sure, but I find if I can keep them tighter, they're less active, and when they're less active, they seem to winter better. For the humidity, that's a good question. Um, you have to appreciate that the honeybee hive, inside or outside, they drink water all year long, even if they can't fly. And they're accessing this water through the winter um, by drinking the condensation around the cluster. So if the colony is outside, they're looking to that outer edge of the nest box. When they're inside, I find the condensation is forming a little bit just above them here. So I like to keep that humidity level within the shed around that 45, maybe 50, and that provides them with enough, it provides an environment so their perspiration will condense, and then the bees will, I've actually seen it. Just tiny little droplets of condensation on the edge of the, well, I call them foamies, but those, uh, you know what I'm talking about, those bubble wrap things. I have them on the top, and just a little slightest film of moisture, and the bees will go out there, access, and they're drinking. They're drinking all winter long. Through the cold periods of winter in January, when the air is very dry, and I'm bringing this cold, dry air in, and then we're exchanging it, releasing warm moisture. Inside of the shed will get the relative humidity will drop. At one winter, I wasn't watching, and it dropped around that 15%. It gets pretty dry in that. So I'm maybe concerned about not having the proper environment where they can access that condensation. They're accessing the waters within the honey itself, but I'm looking for them to get that secondary effect of condensation. So I'll dump some water in the floor just to bring the humidity in the shed up a little bit. And whether that works or not, I'm not sure. I know some guys will go with a garden sprayer, just water them down a little bit. The bees will come out, take a little drink. Got to be careful with that though, because if you get water running down the hives, you might spread disease like nosema or amoeba or some bacterial infections. I know another guy. He loves his bees, and he'll make these little snowballs. He'll give them every one of the colonies a snowball to drink through the winter. So there's that. And then there's the debate about carbon dioxide, but that's we can leave that for another discussion.
Yeah. The next two questions are from Russell Koopman, and the first one, he asks, Ian, what is Carrie doing nowadays?
Carrie, I have her in the old honey house. Well, she starts her day in the morning by processing my wax. We have a wax melter beside the spinner, and we feed it continually. But production, if you know, we usually get 1% wax, 1% of the wax per volume honey. This year we had an exceptionally high honey crop, so we produced a lot of wax. So the wax melter wasn't keeping up, so we dump them in drums. And right now she's just finishing up the last of the drums, putting the wax through the first time. And we have quite a stack in the corner. So now we're going to send it through a second time just to clean up maybe a little bit more of that honey, take those honey specks out. Not a lot of slum. She does a pretty good job on her first pour, but just clean the wax up a little bit, more uniform blocks, and ready for sale. So when she's done her wax chores, I have her in the old facility working on equipment maintenance. So right now she's through the escapes. Like I use escape boards to clear my honey boxes out, and we're pretty hard on those. So at the end of the season, they're beat up. So she puts a little bit of time into reconditioning them. I noticed she's been working away at that, but she's shifted to fixing and scraping up all the dead outs. I think we pulled in a couple hundred boxes of deads from summer, and we wanted to, because we had such a long drawn out fall, we wanted to get into these boxes, scrape them up, and we made them into split boxes with foundation and everything, because we wanted to get them out of the shop outside and freeze them out to kill the wax moth. We just noticed the wax moth is starting to get into them. So then after that, she'll be working on bottom board pallets and tops, and I have a stack of boxes that need repair in the back, and that should keep her busy for a good. I hope to be able to keep her busy all winter, but as soon as the maintenance runs out, I'll lay her off for a little bit, and I'll bring her back in the spring.
The next question is from Russell Koopman again, and he asks, Ian, did you use sticky boards when you were using Formic?
Just to monitor on a couple. I only did 200 colonies with that, and I did some, and whether or not I seen drop or not, I don't think it was fair because I didn't follow the label direction on the duration of the full treatment. I only used one pad, so I think maybe I needed to use a second pad to see more efficacy. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is from Brian from Flower Street Farm Bees. He asks, has Veroskin, I hope I'm saying that right, been approved in Canada?
Not yet, but I had an email from a retailer that it sounds like they're trying to get through the process through the PMRA to be able to actively sell oxalic acid extender. The ability how should I put this? Right now, our associations are lobbying the government to allow us to use oxalic acid glycerin in a towel or a sponge, kind of like a beekeeper made. They give us permission to do that. Trying to get that label expanded to allow registration so beekeepers can use it, and that hasn't followed through yet. We're trying to push that along, but everything is just so damn slow in government. So I can't see this being approved until they tackle the first one on their table.
Yeah. The next question is from Gary Stewart, and he says, "Howdy, why do bees always abscond in the fall, even though they have little to no chance of surviving? Bees usually are very efficient."
I'm not sure if I have the same experience in this way. I don't typically have bees will swarm off or abscond on me later in the season. I'm not sure where Gary would be. Maybe more conditional. Um, you have to appreciate our seasons are very distinct. We have 4 very distinct seasons, and the bees, as soon as the season shifts or the conditions shift to that condition or shift to that season, um, they go from summer, maybe swarmy, to fall, winter horty, and I've never do I ever think about any type of swarming or managing my bees where I'm going to lose them in any way. So yeah, I bet you his comment is based on something he's seeing within his own region. I can't help him.
Yeah. He said maybe the drought we had this year here in West Virginia, 13 weeks, no rain at all.
That's pretty dry. Yeah.
Yep. The next question is from Jason at the Egon Homestead Apiary, and he asks, Ian, what is the indicator to start the spring 10-day weather forecast or a certain date?
So, yeah, in the spring, when I set them out, I'm looking for that period of time where basically weather chases me out of the shed because I can't keep the shed cool, and the bees start bearding and getting too active, and I have to put them out to where they're flying, which is a good thing, get them up and flying. But sometimes we have false starts in their spring and get them up and flying, then it gets terribly cold again. So they suffer a little bit in the cold. So what I would like to do is set these colonies out, maybe because of the refrigeration I now have in my shed, maybe allow to hold them just a little bit longer to get them through that false start and set them down. Because you want to set them down, get them flying, get them building, and upward trajectory. You don't want that interruption, right? So I'm looking for when spring starts. Flight weather, right? 10 degrees.
Yep. Next question is from Philip Morse from RTX Honeybees, and he asks, Ian, if you could, what would you change about bee imports and exports with the United States?
Well, a little bit of a loaded question. So right now, bee imports come from the States only as queens. They come from California and Hawaii, and maybe Georgia if you can get a designated area. I think there's opportunity accessing bees from the United States, specifically in Northern California, where we already have designated zones to develop out these queens, mitigating certain risks that Canadian beekeepers are concerned about. And there's in the process right now, working with our government and working with the American government and American beekeepers to maybe look into the opportunity of bringing bees in from Northern California by mitigating some of the risks that beekeepers are concerned about bringing in. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there, and I think it's important because we seem to be having more trouble with continual losses year after year, mostly because of varroa mite. We're trying to build our operations, and like I was talking about earlier, I use a nuke battery. I try to keep my losses minimal by replenishing them with my own stock, and it works very well. It works very well until it doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, typically it doesn't work for anybody, and there's a shortage of bees across the countryside, and we're looking for that act of replacement, that's affordable, available, and high quality. The bees coming up from California are timed uh, just perfectly, actually. Nice young bees, ready to work, uh, as compared to some of the bees that we buy currently right now from New Zealand or Australia or Chile, Italy, other places in the world where the timing is different. So we're not bringing in the same uh, the same type of bee. And when we are, they're going through so much with transportation that some of those colonies are being compromised, including the queens. So there's a lot of good bees that are flowing over. Don't get me wrong about that, but there's a lot of steps in between that beekeeper and the beekeepers in Canada. That when one of those steps stumbles, the beekeeper takes it in the neck, and it's not. It just adds risk, adds cost, just adds problems. And we need to be able to. There's a lot of beekeepers make the argument that we need to simplify the process and maybe access stock in places where we can mitigate some of the health risks, uh, where the bees are available and affordable and high quality. So that's basically the politics that's going on up here in Canada. They're just trying to sort all this out. And I, for one, I would rather, keep things internal, not have to rely on imports. I mean, buying bees, you're not making any money. If you can generate the stock within your own operations, you're making money hand over fist because instead of doling it out, it's all coming in and staying in your pocket. Ultimately, that's our objective. When shit hits the fan, you need a backup plan, and that backup plan has to be in place. And already working. If the other, I very rarely bought queens for a while, but when I needed the queens, I could reach out and get them because other beekeepers were already accessing those queens. Other beekeepers already had that system running. So when I needed to pivot and shift and bring in queens, that service was already available. And I could just go like this, just provided me another option. So I need that with package bees. That reduces my risk a little bit. More options, I think, whether it be treatments, um, uh, or management styles or treatment, just different ways of doing things or accessing bees from other places to be able to replenish losses. There
Yeah.
you go. That's just my take on it.
Hey Bruce, good to see you in here from down here in Alabama. So good to see you. Thanks for checking in.
Yeah, I
Um, we,
watched Bruce's video last night, and he was having a little bit of trouble with mites, and it
yeah.
looks like his thymol treatment worked very well. Shaking zeros, you could hear the excitement in his voice when he's looking at zeros, another zero. And I like hearing zeros.
Oh, yeah, it's
Zeros
very
are
good.
heroes.
Yeah, we have three more questions, and we'll go on and kind of get close to ending this thing off since we're already here at an hour and 8 minutes. P Body's apiary, and he asks, Ian, why did you decide to winter inside shed? Did you have loss outside beforehand?
I used to winter outside. A lot of beekeepers do. Just a preference to move inside. I felt I was able to control more conditions, and I feel I can bring more colonies through successfully, more predictably indoors. And from my experience with the variability of outdoor, as I was bringing them indoors, I was just kind of leveling off my losses. I mean, throw mites in the equation, it doesn't matter, right? Sick colonies aren't going to winter indoors any better than outdoor colonies. But I also, we talked about my nuke battery a little bit earlier, and I use my indoor shed to really focus in on the efficiencies of building these nukes. And building out these nukes in the smaller units, as I was showing you the fives and then the sixes, and only one story. And my philosophy behind that is to keep them tight, because my focus is, well, if I can get the honey, great. But if my main primary focus is development of that nuke, of that queen, and get her through. And I want to restrict her growth at that time so she doesn't wear herself out. So then when she makes it through the winter, I drop her into a box. They're one of my most productive colonies the following year. So it's kind of just like holding her back until she explodes the next season. And by raising a smaller unit, you're wintering a smaller cluster, and a smaller cluster just increases your risk for winter loss, which winter better in a climate controlled building. So there's multifaceted reasons behind that. I also hated wrapping colonies. To spend all this money on wrap and have mice chew it apart, just hated it. And it has always seemed to be that last chore in the fall before winter set in, is going out to wrap these colonies up, because we had land work. You got to get the land work done before the frost sets in. You got to haul the bales in. All these jobs that took priority, and finally got to the bees when it's already snowing and it's wet. My fingers are cold. I can hardly feel my fingertips. Trying to wrap them up, dealing with wraps that are just stink of mice. I just hated that. So my management philosophy is, if you really hate something, focus on that and try to figure it out so you can take the hate out of your job. And so that was one of the things I hated, and it made my job a lot more enjoyable. I have an easy loader. You go and pick up my colonies, put it on the truck, zip it up to the honey house, take them off the forklift, stack them in the shed. It's the way I prefer to winter bees.
Yeah. The next question is from Mark Miller, and he asks, Ian, how do you battle spending into the business versus profit? When does one know when you have found that neutral ground?
Yeah, that's, as a beekeeper, as I was growing, it's a continual investment into your operations. You have to have goals, and you have to work towards those goals. Then you have to map out your investment into your operation accordingly, because ultimately this is a business. We need to keep afloat. We can't just keep pouring money into something, and then you've got to be working towards something. So my goal was earlier on, 500 colonies, set the plate, invested into the facility that managed that, and then I took the next step after that. After that, I invested a little bit more, got me up to 900 colonies. My focus was 1,000 at that time. Investment in there, worked towards that, and then satisfied all my debt commitments. And next step after that, it was 1,500, another facility, a truck, extractor, blah da 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 da, just whatever goal was there. So is like any other business, map it out, map your investment out, so you're not just dumping the money in there. You're putting the money into a plan, and you're trying to achieve these objectives. And while you do that, you just watch your investment to make sure you have money at the end to pull out to live on. And that's a hard one, right? Because you need to be able to produce, to be able to reap the benefit. You have a tough year, you're going to go hungry. That's a hard one with beekeepers.
The last question that we will answer tonight is from Bracken from Utah, and he asks, Ian, what is your favorite thing and worst thing about beekeeping?
Oh boy, that is a good question. I'm going to bounce that off you, Grayson, first, just to see what you have to say. Then I'll answer after you.
Well, my favorite thing about beekeeping, well, there's I think I really like everything about it, but I think my favorite thing is, I've told many beekeepers, is just really is a really fun. It's fun for me to be able to just go into those colonies and see what they are doing and working together. That's just one of my favorite things about beekeeping. I really like what I see, and be able to just something whenever you just open a colony and you just smell what most beekeepers can feel. It's really hard to explain, but that's my favorite thing about beekeeping is seeing all the bees work together and working together to make something happen, make things happen. But my worst thing of beekeeping that I don't like would probably be hive beetles. If I had to say, hive beetles have been terrible down here for a long time. This year has not been as bad as some, but last year was just one of the worst years we've had for beetles. It was just unbelievable. I had some colonies abscond because of those beetles. It was a bad time for us to have beetles last year, especially with the bad drought.
Well, that's a good question. Good answer. Yeah. Um, Maybe I'll piggyback off that. I remember as I was just getting into the hobby, um, and I had 30 colonies, and I lost them all, and that demoralizing feeling, just getting gut punched. That's the worst thing about beekeeping is the pure and utter failure that these bees can send you through, and it's gut wrenching. And it takes a lot of guys out because some guys can't handle that. They put all this time and investment and their enthusiasm into this craft they're excited about, and all of a sudden they're utter failures, and they for no reason whatsoever. And some people can't climb out of that. That's what makes farmers unique in a lot of ways is we're able to manage all those all the conditions, but we're able to manage ourselves as we go through these highs and these lows, and we can get through to the next year. Um, but the through that first initial loss I had one living colony, and that I just happened to pull that colony from a church, St. Lucasen Church. I dropped it into a box, and it was the only one that lived that winter. And I was going to throw in the towel, but I had this colony that was alive, and I kept going back to it, and I kept digging into it, and it's just so damn fascinating. There's something about those bees that attracted me back to them all the time. And I don't think I called my holy hive, but I don't think because I come from a church, I don't think if it was for that colony, I don't think I'd be a beekeeper right now, just because I wouldn't have any bees to be able to enjoy and help me pull myself out of that slump. So it's just that connection to the natural world. Like I'm a farmer, I'm a grain farmer. We That's all I know. That's all my family knows, and we're always interacting with the environment and interacting with using the natural world to produce food and that. And the bees give me a very unique perspective on that natural world that I wasn't really familiar with. As we're grain farming, we're dealing with soil, we're dealing with plants and growth, and then everything else. But the bees, they connected me with cycles and and the natural aspect of the landscape that you can't manage, that's being managed by Mother Nature. And I'm using that, or the bees are using that, to be able to maintain their growth and development all the way through the year. And then I was using that as a beekeeper, managing their behavior according to what was going on out there to build to produce. And that's one thing I think I like the most about farming and most about beekeeping is that pure sense of production. You know, where do they get all this honey from? It's an absolutely amazing thing. You have all these little bees fly off to these trillions of flowers. They all fly back. And as you notice, the colonies just start filling full of honey. And it's one of the more exciting things I think I ever experience every year is just that bounty being brought into the colonies and then harvesting, just reaping the bounty of Mother Nature to its purest extent. So that's what I like about the bees, and the other loss and failure they send you into that roller coaster is what I don't like about the bees. So that's a really good question. I had a hard time answering that.
Brad says he's too humble to say, but I know Ian's favorite thing about beekeeping is getting to meet Brad.
Damn right. Brad, he's the president of the Red River Apis Association, and he's the one that convinced me to become a director on the Manitoba Beekeepers Association. Brad and I are still directors on that association together, so we we bounce a lot of feedback off each other in regards to politics and such. That U.S. package question a little further back, we're right in the heart of that one. So there's a lot of commotion and a lot of drama going on in Canada right now.
Oh yeah, I get you. Hey Ricky, thanks for joining us tonight. Grayson's getting all the big dogs on his channel. I am jealous. Oh yeah, thanks Ricky for joining in. It's good to have Ian on here tonight. And since we've already gone for about an hour and 20 minutes, it's amazing how time flies. I always tell people that during my chats. It's always goes by really fast, and then it's over within a beat. So I appreciate you joining us tonight, Ian, and spending time with us tonight. And I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. And before we do leave, I want to thank Joey, me again, Joey, for a $20 donation. I really do appreciate you for donating. And again, thank you, Ian, for joining us tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to do so.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I enjoy watching your channel because you provide that sense of ambition that a lot of younger beekeepers, new beekeepers have. That maybe an old, I'm not old yet, but I'm 25 years into the business, and I'm built into a business, and sometimes I feel like I've lost that ambition. No, I haven't lost ambition, or otherwise I wouldn't be beekeeping. But that the innocence of the beginning of the beekeeper is something I just love seeing with new beekeepers. That's why I like talking to beekeepers, because I can extract some of that maybe, and it brings me back to when I first started. So I hope I didn't ramble too much, because I just rambled on there again at the end. So,
no worries.
I always tell guys, get that salt shaker out. Just take a pinch of salt for everything I say.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. And, I really do appreciate you joining us again. And it's really fun listening to what you had to say. It's been a really fun chat. So thank you all for watching. Be safe. And I also wish everybody, including Ian, a happy Thanksgiving. So take care, everybody, and we'll see y'all next time.
Cheers.